Good morning, everybody. And this is an impromptu NBA strategy show. So here's a little background on what's going on. I'm doing the show this morning with Belman here. So as you guys saw yesterday, we started something new. Josh was really passionate about trying to do the strategy show by himself. He had a lot of stuff that he wanted to try out. And what happens this morning? Josh's power went out like 10 minutes ago, and it wasn't like a wide power outage. He sent me the text message, so I'll read it to you guys. It was. Let's see. Here it is. All right. It says that there is a service outage in the area. Estimated customers impacted, approximately 1. So Josh's power went out and nobody else's in his area. Just him went out, and they told him that his power is not going to be on for a couple of hours. So we're going to maybe wait if his power is going to be on soon, but it wasn't. So I just jumped on, and you were ready, which was cool. Well, ready is relative, but you were available to hop on the show. Unfortunately, Lofty's daughter is sick this morning, so he wasn't available. So we scrambled, we put a show together, and thank you guys very much for tuning in. If you could do us a favor as you're watching, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are sponsored here today by BetMGM, and we've got a very special offer for all you guys here, and it's something that is only available to people who are viewers of our live shows. We've got a promo going on that's only going to run through Friday. So starting today through Friday, promo code Wemby. If you sign up using the link below, you get 50% off your first week of Sims Max payment. So if you guys want to sign up for a weekly package, sign up using the link below. Promo code's already loaded in, 50% off. So hopefully we were thinking this is a cool way for you guys to test out our NBA Sims product with, like a month left in the NBA season. So only available to people watching the show, promo code Wemby. Sign up with that link below. Matt, once again, thank you for jumping on with me here. How are you doing this morning?
I am good. Was happy that I actually saw the message. I did not read Josh's message closely to see that only one person affected. I've never even heard of that because, we get messages like that here where like the area will be affected, but never seen that one person. That's just bad luck.
The thing that was funniest about it, though, to me was that it said approximately 1. It was like it could be 0, it could be 2, but we're thinking it's about 1.
It's so good.
So yeah, Josh not available. I would be curious though if you guys have any thoughts or input on the show that he did by himself yesterday. Any thoughts you guys have, you could always leave that below. We did get a lot of positive feedback on it, so I'll always be interested to see what it is you guys want to hear him talk maybe more about or anything like that. So hopefully his power comes back in short order, and then Josh will be back on for the deep dive and all that later on in the day. But one thing I want to do here is I did run Sims here for the morning here, and just want to start by reading off the top overall projected lineup I got to by SimRY in the Sims I ran. And it was Marcus Sasser, Sam Merrill, Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, Şengün, Dennis Schroeder, Karis LeVert, and Victor Wembanyama. So that is the lineup that I have built as of this morning. This is the highest SimRY. So a couple of things you'll notice here. First off, Wemby, who we've got our promo code for today, Wemby, that promo code down below. So Wemby's in the lineup as a pay-up option. And then we're getting to a bunch of exposure to the Cavs. No surprise, because we've found out that Donovan Mitchell is going to be out for a couple of days. So something to keep in mind as we go through here on the show, just kind of some of the value spots that we're seeing ourselves get to. But let's jump into the first game on the slate, Matt, and we will go starting with the Orlando Magic against the Charlotte Hornets. We got an 8-game slate today. And for Orlando, the only player on the injury report is Markelle Fultz. He is questionable due to injury maintenance, and he's been on the injury report fairly regularly this season. So if Markelle Fultz is not able to play, Matt, what kind of an impact would that have on the other backcourt players from Orlando? Would that make it so that there's anybody you really want to be getting to, whether it be, like Cole Anthony or Jalen Suggs from Orlando?
I think it makes both those guys certainly more in play, but Fultz has not been playing a ton anyways, even when he's been active. So it's not like they're taking out, 30 plus minutes or anything like that. I think it makes both those guys look better. It makes, I don't know if all of Orlando look better, but Orlando's already in a good spot. I think Fultz being out doesn't make anyone like a must roster, but it just like adds a feather to their caps.
Yeah, and if you look right now at the exposures that I'm getting to in the Sims from Orlando, which it is projecting Markelle Fultz in, because typically in our projections, if somebody's questionable, we're usually projecting them in. And yeah, with Fultz projected in right now, I'm not getting to anything. got 2% of Wendell Carter Jr. as my most rostered player from the Magic. And there's no real ownership here either. I mean, he's the most popular projected player at 5% projected ownership on the team. So I don't really like anything from Orlando. And even if Markelle Fultz is to sit out, like you said, Matt, it makes some other guys look better. But we've already got value early on in the morning. It's hard for me to imagine that like Orlando guys become higher priorities than like the Cavs value without Donovan Mitchell or anything like that. So I don't really see a whole lot to like from Orlando, regardless of the status of Markelle Fultz. But any of the pay-up options stand out to you in any kind of way?
Well, I'll say this, like comparing Orlando and Charlotte, I'm with you, especially because it's not just Mitchell. Max Strus is out and Okoro's questionable. So like all those bench guys are just look good at their price points. That said, Orlando is facing Charlotte. So I think all these guys are like in play in tournaments. I don't think any of them are building blocks, but my favorite would be Banchero. He's been good. He's probably fairly priced for his median outcome. He's not a guy that has like Jokic like upside or anything like that, but he can certainly give you what you need at 8,600 in this spot. Again, not a building block, but more than fine with it if I end up with him at like 8,600. You know what I mean?
Yep. And by the way, total extremely low for this game. I don't know if you caught this, but 207.5. This is one of the lowest totals we've seen of the entire season. It's the lowest one I can remember seeing in a minute. And the next lowest total is actually the next game that we're going to talk about, Boston-Cleveland, 215.5. But yeah, this game expected to feature way less scoring than every other game on the slate. So we'll talk about the other side of the game with the Charlotte Hornets. The one piece of injury news that we have here is that Nick Richards is currently listed as questionable to play. Micic actually project for a good amount of ownership here, project for north of 20%. I'm hardly getting to him. He's only in 2% of my lineups. But let's start by talking about Nick Richards, Matt. If he's not able to play, where do you see the rebounds going, and what would happen with the minutes in the front court for the Hornets?
Not entirely sure, because I could see Miles Bridges picking up some of those big man minutes, like not all of them, but it would make me like him more. It's such a bad spot for Charlotte, and their bench bigs suck. So like, I don't want to play like the JT Thors of the world on this slate. I don't think we need that. Whoever's starting, I think, would become in play. Do you see it differently?
So I assume that Grant Williams would end up starting. If we look at what the rotation was last game, how many minutes did Grant Williams end up playing? So Williams played, 40.5 minutes for Grant Williams last game with the team shorthanded without Nick Richards. And they ran a really tight rotation. They went to, they played a 9-man rotation last game, but Marquise Bolden played 7 minutes. We got 8 minutes out of JT Thor. So then you just look at just massive minutes for the starters last game. Trey Mann played 30 minutes. Micic started and played 35 minutes. Bridges played 40. Grant Williams started and played 40. Brandon Miller played 36.5. Grant Williams is not the greatest fantasy producer in the world. That's no secret, but he's relatively cheap. If he's going to start and play 40 minutes in the absence of Nick Richards again, then I think you have to consider him, right? Because 40 minutes would be really significant. It's just a question of, is Nick Richards going to be in or out? If Richards is in, no reason to consider Grant Williams. I mean, you look at the projections and the ownership I'm getting to right now, it's hardly anything from Charlotte. Grant Williams certainly comes into play for me if Richards is out, though.
To be perfectly honest, it just skipped my mind that he was on Charlotte. So I'm totally with you. He's been much better for Charlotte, too. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so other than that, Micic, I assume, is going to stick in the starting lineup. We saw him start last game, played 35 minutes. And once again, you wouldn't think that Nick Richards being out would impact somebody like Micic, who's starting at point guard for the Hornets last game. But if they only have 9 guys that they're actually going to give minutes to in the absence of Richards, that means bigger minutes to somebody like Micic. So as of right now, he's only in 2.7% of my lineups and looks like one of the more over-owned players on the entire slate. But that does change if Nick Richards is out, where then just the Hornets are forced to play smaller lineups, and then you're going to be projecting Micic for like 35, 36 minutes. But anything else that stands out that you want to talk about from the Hornets?
Not really. I think your point about Richards and Micic makes sense. Like, it just adds more minutes that Charlotte's going to need to play like their main guys right now if Richards is out. So they don't have like a guy that they can just replace with Richards. I think you're right. Like, it's going to be a combination of guys. So, yeah, Charlotte looks good because they're a little bit shorthanded and not expensive, but they're not in a good matchup. And we've got other good spots in the slate. So, I don't know.
Anything else at all from this game? If not, we could move on to the next one.
Let's move on.
All right. So the next game that we have here on my list of games to talk about, we've got the Boston Celtics taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers. And like I said, this game has the second lowest total on the slate. And there's a lot of unknowns about Boston heading into this game as well, because the injury report for them is got a couple of key players on it. Kristaps Porzingis is questionable and Jaylen Brown is questionable. But let's start with this, Matt. If both of them play, Porzingis and Brown, is there anything you like from the Celtics in the event that everybody is in?
No. I mean, they're all really good. So on any day, you can play any of their good players, and they've got a bunch of them. But it's not a good spot. They're priced where they should be. So if they're all in, no.
And now let's talk about the scenario where potentially for these guys to be out. And the first thing I want to ask you, if Porzingis and Jaylen Brown both end up sitting, who would be the player that you see is benefiting the most from the Celtics if neither of them end up playing?
Tatum. Then Tatum becomes like close to a lock in my mind. Even in this spot, he sees a huge bump when either one of Brown or Porzingis are out. If both of them are out, Tatum, I know a lot has been talked about like his MVP candidacy in the past month or so. He's not going to win MVP, nor should he. But he is a guy that if he were on a worse team would have better numbers easily, in my opinion. He takes a back seat a lot of times because they've got so many good players. So when he doesn't have to take a back seat to their second and third options, I think, you see upside Tatum. So if they're both out, I like Tatum a lot. Even if one of them is out. And actually, I prefer Porzingis being out for Tatum than Brown, but I think it's similar.
There's some really interesting on-off court numbers for the Celtics. So with Brown and Porzingis off the court this year, Tatum does lead the team. No surprise. 1.48 DraftKings points per minute, 1.42 FanDuel points per minute. I mean, he's already the best fantasy producer on the team. Obviously, he's going to be the best fantasy producer on the team when Brown and Porzingis are off the court. Here's what really catches my eye about the on-off court numbers, though, Matt. Derek White this year, and Stephen Leibowitz brought this up in chat too. He says, wouldn't mind Holiday or White with two Celtics out. Derek White, 1.31 DraftKings points per minute, 1.25 FanDuel points per minute in the minutes he's played with Brown and Porzingis off the court this year. So if we get that scenario where both these guys are out, relative to price, Derek White looks like a really strong option. What do you make of those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, he looks really, really good. I didn't even talk about their secondary options. I should have, but Derek White, White, Tatum, Holiday would look really good. I do like White and Tatum more than Holiday, but I think they're all really good plays if that's the circumstance we're under tonight.
And then a matchup against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It is a bigger front court that Cleveland has. So do you think this could be a spot? We haven't seen a lot of him lately, but if Porzingis and Brown are both out, considering the size of Cleveland, could this be a game where Luke Kornet starts at center?
Definitely. I don't want to say I think it's 100% to happen, but it's certainly a spot where it could and should. I mean, if not this spot, when, right?
When was the last game he started at center? It was... Okay, so the last time we saw him start at center was against the Spurs. That was to match up with the size of Wemby, and we did get 30 and a half minutes from him in that spot. And then we also got Luke Kornet started against the Toronto Raptors on December 29th. He played 33 and a half minutes in that game. So we've only seen two starts out of Luke Kornet this year, but in those starts, averaged 32 minutes and 35.13 DraftKings points. Now, not that I'm saying if he starts, we're expecting him to score 35 fantasy points. That'd be a ridiculous expectation. But it does look like somewhere around 30 minutes would be a reasonable projection for Kornet if he starts. And relative to his price tag, that would obviously make him a really, really strong value option. Probably the best play overall on the entire slate. So a lot of moving parts here. We still need to see what ends up happening with Porzingis and Brown. But Luke Kornet does seem like somebody who's potentially live to end up starting in that scenario, considering the size of Cleveland. Any other cheapies from Boston you think could really end up benefiting if Porzingis and Brown both sit?
No, I think you hit the nail with Kornet. I don't know. I mean, I guess could see Cleveland's just big. So I think it's Kornet. He's the guy there. And then Al Horford probably becomes viable. Not necessarily like a cheap value, but I'm sure he's priced around $5K. I haven't even looked at him. So I think he would become in play. He is 5,600. So don't like him as much, but a fine play if those guys are out.
Yeah, and a good point as well by Steven Leibowitz in chat where he was saying that Tillman's gotten more minutes the last 2 games than Kornet. They could go to Tillman, so it's definitely up in the air. They've started Kornet in the past. We haven't really seen this scenario since Tillman's been there, but yeah, the same thing would go for Tillman. If they end up starting Tillman at center, he would also look like a really good value option. Just not exactly sure which way they're going to end up going. But we'll know later on more in the day when we get to, deep dive and live before lock about who's in, who's out for the Boston Celtics. Another thing also that makes some of the recent games difficult is they're just steamrolling everybody.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are they even intending to do with some of these minutes? Last game, they beat the Warriors by 52 points. The game before that, listen to this stretch of games, actually. So they beat the Warriors by 52 points last game. The game before, they beat Dallas by 28. They beat the Sixers by 18, the Knicks by 14, the Bulls by 17. They beat the Nets by 50 the game before that. They have not been in a remotely competitive game in a meaningful amount of time. So it does make it a little bit hard to know, like, what are they actually intending to do with minutes, Luke Kornet versus Xavier Tillman. But we'll know later on the day when the starting lineups come out. Anything else you want to add from Boston?
No, but I'm on Team Kornet there. Like, I think Tillman has gotten more minutes because of the blowouts. And, yeah, they could blow out here. Cleveland doesn't have Mitchell. They don't have Strus. Boston's better than them. But Cleveland's good. It's in Cleveland. Like, I think Cleveland should be able to keep this game relatively competitive. And in that case, I think Kornet plays more than Tillman. That's just my opinion. Like you said, we'll see later.
And on the other side of the game with the Cleveland Cavaliers, we do have no Donovan Mitchell. He's dealing with knee soreness. I think they said he's supposed to be out at least 3 more games, and then they're going to reevaluate where Donovan Mitchell stands after that. In addition, Max Strus is out tonight. So all kinds of value on Cleveland and potentially more coming. Isaac Okoro is questionable. He's been starting in place of Donovan Mitchell. Karis LeVert is questionable, and we know that he is somebody who's a big part of the Cleveland Cavaliers rotation, especially when Mitchell or Garland are out. So as a result, I'm getting to so much exposure on my first run here to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Sam Merrill in 76% of lineups. LeVert is in 68% of lineups, and he's currently questionable. So that opens up all kinds of other playing time if he's not able to play. I've got 22% of Garland. Okoro's in 14% of lineups, and he's questionable to play. Matt, what do you make of the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight with so many guys out and LeVert and Okoro also both on the injury report? At least this, what are you confident in looks good from Cleveland at the moment?
Darius Garland. His price is a little bit up, but I know I took a second to answer that. But I was thinking Garland at 7,200, he's going to play a ton. He's been good. He's been solid, if not spectacular, but he's still got upside at this price. I hate the matchup, but he's going to have the ball in his hands so much. If this game is competitive, I like Garland. I like Mobley. Mobley's also expensive, 7,500. Only getting 8.5% ownership, also 8.5% chance to be optimal. I think that with these guys out, not only Mitchell, but Strus, who's a pretty good offensive player for them, you're going to see more just Mobley doing more on the offensive end. I think he's capable of it. He's been really good, even at this price point. The other thing I like about Mobley is these other guys are all getting love. He's not. He's their best player tonight. So I like that in tournaments. So Mobley and Garland look good to me, even despite a bad matchup. Merrill looks like one of the best value plays on the slate. Will only look better if Karis LeVert is out. If LeVert and Okoro are out, their second and third tier options become certainly viable. I'm not sure who stands out because none of them are great fantasy producers at all. So, like George Niang, Dean Wade, I don't know. There's no one really that stands out to me besides their big guns. How about you?
So, to me, the player who I'm already getting to a lot of right now, and he only stands to benefit and look even better, is Sam Merrill. To me, right now, Sam Merrill is the best overall value option on the slate, and he's going to chuck. And on top of that, even in a blowout, we've seen Sam Merrill get garbage time run this year. And how many players are even – all right, so in a scenario where LeVert and Okoro are both out, in addition to the other players who are out, the Cavs would have Mobley, Allen, Garland, Merrill, Wade, Niang, Damian Jones, Craig Porter Jr. I think they would only have 8 active guys. unless they're going to call like Isaiah Mobley up from the G League or something like that, they could only be running an 8-man rotation. If that's the case, Sam Merrill's going to be forced into big minutes. The other guy, too, that could really look interesting off the bench, Craig Porter Jr. It's been a minute since he's been relevant, but this is a guy who was getting extended run when players were out earlier in the year and was a pretty standout value option. So Craig Porter Jr. is somebody else who doesn't look good now but could benefit later. But the guy I'm getting to now that I'm positive I'm going to later as well is Sam Merrill.
I'm with you. One guy that I'm seeing is on the active roster, at least he was called up on Sunday, is Sharif Cooper. They signed him to a two-way. So I don't know if you mentioned him or not, but just another body. Who knows if they want to play him? I guess like potentially this could be like an Amani Bates spot, like if he gets called up, because they need offensive production. I know that he's a real popular player, not just in the DFS community, but in the basketball community. So I don't know. I mean, as of now, no, but if he gets called up and all those guys are out, maybe. I think we just have to wait and see on Cleveland. The big problem for me is a lot of these guys aren't productive and they're in a really tough spot. So I hate that.
Yeah, and we'll see what ends up happening with any potential G League call-ups. Like you said, Amani Bates is somebody who would be potential to be called up. They've Pete Nance in the G League. They also have Isaiah Mobley. So any of those three guys would be players who could potentially end up being added to the roster. By the way, for King Crow in the chat, who says that he's trying to get the 50% off, but he doesn't see the promo code. Let me click the link below just to try it out. If it's not there, just type in the promo code Wemby, W-E-M-B-Y. That's all capital letters after using that link below. And you could sign up for, keep in mind also, if you didn't click the right link, it's for the Sims Max Weekly. So that's what you would be putting the code in there for, King Crow. But let me know if you still run into issues, and I'll try to help you out on the fly here. But Cavs, this is probably the most important talking point on the slate. Anything else you want to add from them, Matt?
No, I do think if LeVert plays, he looks great, but we just have to wait and see.
All right, so let's go and talk about the Detroit Pistons on the road against the Miami Heat. And yeah, this is a pretty shitty game on paper. Pistons are currently 11.5-point underdogs, biggest spread on the entire slate. Total 217. A lot of curiously low totals on this slate, especially in some of the East Coast games to open it up. But there is a piece of value that is very much standing out from the Detroit Pistons. Quentin Grimes is doubtful to play. We are currently expecting Marcus Sasser to pick up a lot of those minutes. So I'm getting to him in 82% of my first run of lineups. I very highly doubt this is where I land on Sasser, but at least as of right now, we have him projected to play some amount of minutes, and he is a super cheap price point on DraftKings. Don't need to play him on FanDuel, I don't think, where the minimum salaries are a little bit different, but Sasser's the guy that we're projecting to benefit in the absence of Quentin Grimes. Anybody else that stands out to you?
No, but I will say this about Sasser. If like LeVert and Okoro are both in for Cleveland, I think you could make a case that Sasser is on the same level of a play as Sam Merrill.
It's possible for sure. I mean, I assume he'd be the first guard off the bench for Detroit, right?
It's such a bad spot for them, but it's a bad spot for Cleveland. Yeah, weird that like on the East Coast, just really low totals.
Yeah, it is. Let me read all these off. So we have the first few games on the slate, and these are the upcoming ones we're going to talk about. So 207.5, already covered that game. Orlando, Charlotte. Boston, Cleveland, 215. Detroit, Miami, 217. Atlanta, New York, 216.5. Philadelphia, Brooklyn, 216.5. Then we get like normal totals for some of the later games. But yeah, it's really lower totals than what we're used to seeing. And Marcus Sasser stands out because he's expected to get some minutes here. But keep in mind, too, as more players get ruled out on the slate, the Sasser value, he's the first guy who falls by the wayside. So if you start to see LeVert and Okoro are both out, then just more Cleveland value starts to stand out. If, Boston, if Porzingis and Jaylen Brown are both out. So the Sasser value looks good now, but we talk about this on strategy shows all the time. It's one that's likely to go away later on in the day. But anything else stand out to you from Detroit?
No, I was thinking about that when you were just talking, like Jalen Brunson even. Like, I can't imagine he plays today. It would make all the Knicks look better. So, yeah, I think Sasser right now looks good, but could easily fall away.
All right, so let's move on and talk about the Miami side of the game. And clearly on paper, Miami has a pretty good matchup against the Detroit Pistons. It would help if I spelled Miami right when I was trying to sorted here. So pretty good matchup on paper against the Pistons. We do have to consider that there is some risk here of a potential blowout because of the fact that it's the Detroit Pistons and it's a double-digit spread. But some players that I am getting myself exposure to in the early going. Bam Adebayo's in 35% of my lineups. I got 23% of Terry Rozier. Could this finally be a breakout spot for Terry Rozier in his Miami Heat tenure? Because to this point, Matt, he hasn't really had the best results since being traded.
No, he hasn't. Our tools like him quite a bit. I like him here too. They're just in a really good spot at home against Detroit. Rozier is my second favorite guy. I like Bam the most. I really like Bam here. This game could get out of hand, but if that happens, that means Detroit is not scoring. Bam is just going to eat in the inside, just rebounds. Detroit turns the ball over. I think this is an upside spot for Bam. You know, Miami's relatively healthy, so none of these guys are like must plays. But Bam looks really good for me. A little bit overowned according to our tools, but I don't care. There's plenty of ways to get different. He's projected to be under 20% owned. I like Bam a lot here. I like Rozier. You know, I think that he's a play that could easily fall by the wayside depending on what else comes out this slate. But as of now, looks like a solid look at 6,500. That's kind of it for me, though, for Miami. How about you?
Yeah, it's real. The one that is the most interesting to me is Terry Rozier for a couple of reasons. First off, he's clearly underperformed during his time in Miami, which has meant that his price point has gone down. And we would have expected him to have a lower price point in Miami, just different role for him on the Heat versus what he had on the Hornets when the Melo Ball was out. But the minutes are there for Terry Rozier now, and the usage has kind of been there as well. He just has to actually make his shots because the last 3 games, he's played over 30 minutes in all of them. 30 and a half minutes, 33 minutes, 32 and a half. And his usage rate in these games as well, it's 18%. So that was a lower game, but then 28% and 27%. If he is going to be able to play 30 plus minutes against the Detroit Pistons with a usage rate that could be as high as 28%, that's an interesting tournament option to me.
Yeah, it is. And I forgot to even say that Tyler Hero's out. So that really helps the Miami guys. Probably part of the reason they're pulling ownership. And they look good. I don't even hate Butler at 8,100. I don't think this is like the Butler spot. I doubt he's getting up for a game against Detroit. But Detroit sucks. So Butler could easily have a really good game here. I do like Bam and Rozier better, though, just because I think there's less opportunity cost with Rozier at his price and higher upside with Bam because of his inside presence.
All right. So, by the way, a couple of guys are saying they can't get the promo code to work. I am going to send a message in our chat to get that worked out. Yeah, not sure why it isn't working there. So, my bad on that. Nothing I could do right now, but trying to work on it. Anything else you want to talk about from the Miami Heat? Like you said, Tyler Hero's out, but that's one of the reasons that we already have Terry Rozier looking pretty good.
Yep, I'm good.
All right, so let's move on to the next game then, and that is the Atlanta Hawks against the New York Knicks. And on the Atlanta side of the game here, we've got the same ongoing situation where Trae Young is out. I am skeptical whether he's going to return at all this year, especially because there's only about a month left here in the regular season. And they've got some other players on the injury report, like Kobe Buffkin, not going to have a massive impact, although if he doesn't play, there's really limited amounts of backcourt guys for the Hawks to be giving minutes to. The players are kind of all priced up at this point, though, for the absence of Trae Young, which doesn't really make anybody stand out. DeJounte Murray's expensive. Jalen Johnson's expensive. It's also another fairly low total game on the road here for the Hawks, only 215.5. Is there anything you like from Atlanta?
Yeah, I like Murray in tournaments as a contrarian spend-up option. He's probably priced where he should be right now, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have upside at this price, even in a tough spot. I was talking about this with Josh last week. Murray was like upper 10Ks for a lot of his time in San Antonio towards the end. So this is a guy that can produce at upper price tag type levels. Now, he's got a better team around him in Atlanta than he did there probably, and it's a bad spot against the Knicks. We've talked about already some bad spots. So like if Brown or Porzingis or both are out, I certainly like Tatum over Murray. But if those guys are in, I think it's close. And all of a sudden, I think you can poke holes at some of the other studs on this slate. And while you can certainly do that for Murray as well, he's not getting ownership. So I like that. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's actionable for me to play him here, but certainly wouldn't mind getting to him, once in 3 lineups or whatever it is.
Anything else? I mean, this is just not a team that you guys see. The player I'm getting the most exposure right now is Clint Capella in 5% of lineups. Or I know the majority of people watching play, like 1, 2, 3 lineups. There's nobody I would play from Atlanta in that kind of scenario.
Yeah, Murray's the only guy for me that I would even consider. Like I said, doubt I'd get there, but he's in the pool for me.
Let's talk about the Knicks side of things, where, I mean, this team just continues to get run into the ground by war criminal Tom Thibodeau, because there's a record. I don't know if you caught this last game, Matt. This is an unbreakable record. Last game, Miles McBride came off the bench in a regulation game and played about 47 and a half minutes. That will never be topped. That's impossible. That's impossible to break. What ended up happening is Jalen Brunson injured his knee on the very first play of the game, like 30 seconds in. So as a result, Miles McBride checks in, plays the rest of the game. There is no player that will play more than 47 and a half minutes in a regulation game that they don't start in. It's an impossible record to break.
Unless it goes to overtime.
But that's what I said, in a regulation game.
Oh, yeah. I thought you said regular season for some reason. But yeah, you're right. And yes, I definitely knew about it because that was such an embarrassing loss for the Cavs. You had Josh Hart grabbing at Mitchell's chain. I mean, the Knicks just own the Cavs. If the Knicks play the Cavs in the playoffs, the Knicks will dog walk them because they own them. I think the Cavs are pretty good and can really compete with anyone else in the East besides probably Boston. But the Knicks just have their number. So horrible loss for Cleveland. Watched a lot of that game. As far as tonight goes, do you think Brunson plays? I can't imagine he plays.
So I'm not sure. If you made me guess right now, I would say yes, because Tom Thibodeau if guys are available to play, if a guy is better than 5% healthy, they're out there and they're playing 40 minutes. If they amputate his leg, then yeah, Thibodeau might give him a night off. But the other thing too is the injury in hindsight ended up being not nearly as bad as it was in real time, because in real time it looks like a non-contact injury, but what actually ended up happening was he banged knees with Hartenstein. And then it just ended up his knee was sore. So it was a knee-on-knee contact. So with that in mind, I do think that Brunson's probably more likely to play than what I otherwise would have thought. When the injury first happened the other day, I just assumed that it was something where he was probably going to be out for the season, because it looked like a non-contact knee injury.
Yes, and I'm with you that, after it was figured out that it was just a knee-on-knee type injury, that does increase his chances of playing. If I'm the Knicks, though, if there's any soreness, with how they've been hit with the injury bug, I don't know. I would like to think that they'd be cautious, but as you mentioned, it's Thibodeau, so who the hell knows? If he plays, do you like him here?
If he plays, not really. I have him in 1% of lineups right now, and it's just there's other options I'd rather prioritize on the high end. And considering that we've got him projected in here for just under fit, he's very expensive now as well. So I would the more interesting scenario for the Knicks is if Brunson is out, and then we figure out what to do with the minutes.
I'm with you, but after talking about it with you for just that quick minute, I do kind of think he plays, because this is a team that's playing for seeding also, and if he's good to go, he's going to play.
Gonna play for sure. There's also so much value on this. By the way, I'm saying if he plays, he's going to play full minutes is what I mean by going to play for sure in terms of full minutes. If he's out there, though, even though he's going to likely play full minutes, there's just other spend-up options I'd rather get to on the slate. We're going to talk about Wemby in a little bit and some of the other pay-up options on the slate. And I currently have Brunson in 1% of lives. It's hard for me to imagine this scenario is going to be a priority later.
I think he looks exactly like DeJounte Murray on the other side of this game. They're priced similarly. They're neck to neck in the boom bust tool. I think you could make cases for either of them, and they look very similar in the grand scheme of this slate.
All right. Let's talk about if Brunson doesn't end up playing, where I said that's the much more interesting scenario. I have to assume Miles McBride plays probably close to the entire game. If he came off the bench and played, 47 minutes last game, not that you go out and you project him for 48 minutes, but at a minimum, you have to project him for 40 in a start. Here are the other starts for McBride this year. 227 against the Pelicans, 40 and a half minutes. 2-8, so February 8th against the Mavericks, 45 minutes for Miles McBride. Some other starts for him, 36 minutes against the Magic, 38 minutes against Memphis. At a minimum, I think you have to project him for 40 minutes if he ends up drawing a start, which would clearly make him one of the top value options to get to on the slate as well.
100% with you. I don't know how you can't do that. Yeah, it's crazy, but I'm with you.
By the way, guys, I'm multitasking here while doing the show. Also, messaging about the promo code and the link. It's being fixed right now at the moment. So the YouTube description should be updated shortly, and then I'll be able to throw that link into the YouTube chat as well, and that'll get everything fixed up there. So anything else, though, do you want to talk about from the Knicks and the event that Brunson doesn't play?
No. I mean, this is such a good spot for the Knicks. It almost reminds me of Orlando a little bit that we talked about earlier. They're priced where they should be, but unlike some other teams on this slate, they're in a really good spot. So don't hate any exposure I get here.
All right, we've got the updated link here. I'm going to be throwing this into the chat in a second. Anything else you want to talk about from this game? If not, we will move on to Philadelphia and Brooklyn.
I am good.
All right, so let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. And Mo Bamba's been starting. And there's going to be, if he continues to start, there's going to be one of these games where he just comes out and he plays a full allotment of minutes. But the last couple of games have been pretty frustrating with Mo Bamba as a starter because he's starting, but they're just not really giving him starter minutes. So last two games as a starter, starts against Charlotte. I have him in almost all my lineups that game, Matt. He plays 19 and a half minutes, scores 18 and a half fantasy points. For min price that slate, it wasn't terrible, but certainly wasn't what we were expecting. Then he draws another start last game, plays 14 and a half minutes. So we've got Bamba in here projected for a little bit more minutes this game, the 14 and a half he played last time out, but he's center only eligible. It's hard to project him for a big amount of minutes. What are you going to do with Mo Bamba if he starts again?
Probably not play him. And I hate that because this is a guy that usually when he gets good run is really productive. He's not getting good run, though, even when he's starting. And he still is productive. He's not quite as productive as he was in his Orlando days, though, even when he's getting big minutes. He's not expensive, but he's priced up to $4,400 now. The one thing I will say about him is our tools still have him being like optimal 11% of the time this slate plays out. Only 7% ownership. Like, regardless of how I feel, plays like that will always look good. Just not sure I'll play him. You know what I mean? How about you?
So for me playing 150 lineups, he's a very interesting tournament play because there is, and by the way, he has to start. If he comes off the bench, no interest in him because I do think there's a chance to just go back to Paul Reed as the starter. But there is an opportunity with Bamba as the starter. If he gets off to a good start, they're going to give him those extended minutes. And by the way, guys, I just threw in the updated link. If you click on the one that I just put into the YouTube chat, that is going to have the promo code already loaded in. And that should work if you guys are looking to get the 50% off for the Sims Weekly package. Promo code Wemby already loaded into that link. So my bad. It wasn't really my fault, but I'm going to take the blame for it. It's really Eric's fault. He's the person to really blame in this, but all updated in there. And James Allen in the chat is asking, when is the code good until? So this promo is going to run through Friday. So you could sign up today, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, and then it is going to be ending. But anyway, as far as Bamba goes, if he starts the game well, I assume they give him like 26, 28 minutes. He just hasn't played well in the time he's been on the court so far.
Yeah, you're probably right. I just think there's a lot of opportunity cost on this slate because we probably have better value spots elsewhere. That said, like, we know Bamba has upside in him. I mean, he's a guy that blocks a ton of shots, can hit threes. So he does what DraftKings rewards. I just personally think we're going to have better value. But as of right now, projecting all the questionable guys in, I think he looks fine.
Anything else from the 76ers that really stands out to you? I mean, you guys could see on screen right here, getting some exposure to Bamba, Harris, Lowry, but no real priorities. Most roster player I have right now is Mo Bamba at 8%, which I think is a fair stab to take at a cheap guy with uncertain minutes, but with some upside there. Guys like Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey, they've already been priced up at this point.
Yeah, I think Maxey looks similar to like the Brunsons and Murrays of the world, but I'd rather get to those other guys. I'm with you. Philly's a tough team to prioritize tonight.
So let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets on the other side of the game, where we do have Cam Thomas remains doubtful. Ben Simmons is out due to everything, whatever injuries you want to apply to him. Everything hurts. Everything's an issue. His back hurts. His knee hurts. Everything's been an issue for Ben Simmons staying healthy. And then as far as the other players on the team, like Cam Thomas is doubtful. That opens up minutes as well as usage, because Cam Thomas is somebody who's had a super high usage in the starting lineup this year. And Day'Ron Sharpe is questionable. And here's where I'm most interested in this team. If Day'Ron Sharpe, who is questionable, doesn't end up playing, Matt, what does this do to the minutes ceiling of Claxton? Because I could see a scenario where Nick Claxton has to play really extended minutes if Day'Ron Sharpe isn't there to pick up the backup center minutes.
I think you have upside for like 38 minutes here from Claxton if Sharpe is out, which would make him a really good play. I'm with you there. I think that Claxton already looks okay. Like he's in play right now. He's actually in between DeJounte Murray and Terry Rozier in our boom bust tool. So he looks good. If you get Sharpe out, I think that's one that might not project him to be that much better. But if you read between the lines a little bit, like you just talked about, you could have more minutes for him. And then like the next game Sharpe is out, he's projected better. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you just have to figure also where do the center minutes go if Sharpe is out, and they've got Claxton to give center minutes too. But this is a small team. They could give Trent and Watford some minutes. But think about if we are going, and this is also where Mo Bamba becomes relevant. If Mo Bamba plays extended minutes, are they going to be playing a small ball lineup? Like, are they going to play Dorian Finney-Smith at center with Mo Bamba on the other side? I don't think so. I think this is where they would just give Claxton more minutes.
I agree. And I do think it's almost it's Bamba or Paul Reed. Like, if either of those guys are playing, they need a big man in there.
For sure. And then you look at some of the other players on the team that also are going to be benefiting from that. And also, there's no ownership going to the Nets. So if you guys are looking for a contrarian spot to target, the Nets, no Ben Simmons, no Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, less of an impact overall, but still somebody who, if he is out, that's one less player to give minutes to. So we've got Dennis Schroeder only project for 15% ownership. I'm overweight to him. Cam Johnson project for 10% ownership. I'm overweight to him. Dorian Finney-Smith, 11% ownership. I'm overweight to him as well. These are some guys you can mix into your lineups to differentiate. The matchup against the 76ers, it's way easier on paper than it normally would be since Joel Embiid is out. And I know that this is something that we already know because Joel Embiid's been out for an extended period of time. But still, we don't have to think about the 76ers, some sort of vaunted defense to go up against. I think the Nets players are going well under-owned on this slate. It's pretty easy to get like double the field on a bunch of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, a guy you didn't even mention, Mikal Bridges.
Yeah.
He's the third highest graded leverage play on the slate. He's been inconsistent, but you got to embrace that volatility in tournaments. I'm with you here. Like, it's ugly because Brooklyn sucks, but they might not suck tonight.
And another thing too is there's a lot of usage available to go around on the Nets because Cam Thomas is out. Not to reiterate the same talking points again, but there isn't a whole lot of ownership going here. The one overall that stands out the most to me, Dennis Schroeder, who should be playing pretty significant minutes. He got off to a really, really good start in the Nets game yesterday against the Grizzlies, and then he kind of petered out towards the tail end of the game. Wasn't terrible. He scored 32 fantasy points. I think 5,700 was his price tag, if I remember correctly. But what really stands out about the game that Schroeder had yesterday, 37 and a half minutes. He is going to play a ton with all these guys out for the Nets.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate your Cam Thomas point, because this is something I talked about a couple slates ago. It's not even just the usage. He's a black hole in the Nets offense. He's a guy that takes the ball and doesn't pass. When he's out, I know they played like shit last night, but I'm not worried about that. Like, this offense flows better with him out. He's good. He's good offensively, and they don't have a ton of talent. So I get why he gets good run, but he clogs up their offense because he's a ball hog and a black hole. So these guys look a lot better with him out.
So let's start to talk about the later games, which actually have more reasonable totals. But what's kind of funny about some of these later games, Matt, as we bring them up, is while they do have totals that are more in line with games that we're accustomed to seeing, is there isn't as much value just because of what the injury scenarios are. So for the Pelicans, taking on the Toronto Raptors, 228.5 point total. This is the highest total of any game that we've talked about so far. But pretty much everybody that's relevant is healthy for the Pelicans. Dyson Daniels out, but he's been out for an extended period of time. So we could look at guys like Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, but none of them really stand out to me when the entire team is healthy because there are so many players absent from the earlier games that there are no real priorities here. I'm getting myself some exposure. Brandon Ingram, he's the most interesting option for me to get to. He's in 17% of my top 150 lineups here, but nothing else really stands out. Ingram is somebody who has some upside relative to his price, but also has really, really favorable position eligibility, shooting guard and small forward. So you can play him at two spots that are generally harder to roster. You can get him in the guard spot, the forward spot. So Ingram makes it into lineups, but that's mostly due to his positional flexibility and less to do with us saying like, hey, he's significantly better than Zion or anything like that. So Ingram makes it into lineups because of his flexibility, but I don't really love anything from New Orleans.
I don't either. They all look good because they're in a good spot, but they all don't look great because they're all healthy and priced where they should be. So I don't mind getting to Ingram or Zion or McCollum, but I'm not building around these guys. So probably not the route I'm going to take tonight.
So let's talk about the other side of the game with the Toronto Raptors. And on the Raptors side of the game, the exposures that I'm getting to, it's a little bit more than what I was getting to from the New Orleans side, but still no real crazy priorities for me from Toronto. Bruce Brown is out. Jakob Poeltl is out for a couple of games. Kelly Olynyk just signed a contract extension, which should shore up his minutes, but he's also been priced up, and he's super popular. We've got Kelly Olynyk projected for 23% ownership right here now in the contest generator. So I understand why people are getting to Kelly Olynyk. It's just a little bit too much ownership for me, which is why I'm not really getting him into lineups at the moment.
Like, this is a class, like, I think he's over-owned, and you don't have to play him at all. Like, why would you have to play a $6,300 Kelly Olynyk? That said, I don't hate playing him because I still think he looks fine, and there's plenty of ways to get different. So I don't have a strong take on Olynyk. Like, he's getting too much ownership, and I don't like that. But there's still ways to combat that if you really like him. I just don't know why anyone would like love him so much at 6,300. So probably not where I'm going to go. I like Toronto slightly more than New Orleans, but they're also priced up, and they're also in a much tougher spot than New Orleans. Like, I'd much rather have guys facing the Raptors than New Orleans. Now, I get it. It's a price and projection game, and the Raptors look slightly better here, but just slightly to me. Barrett, quickly, Olynyk. I like them. Don't love them here. How about you?
Yeah, so looking at some of these other players, Barrett, Nwora showing up in a couple of lineups, there's going to be better value than Nwora. I've got 10% of him in lineups now. I could almost guarantee you guys that Nwora will be in almost nothing for me later on in the day, unless he like starts or something like that, and they end up going with, you know, a smaller lineup with Jakob Poeltl out. But I look at my current exposures, and I'm getting to some of RJ Barrett. Another guy, though, who I also think is going to fall by the wayside later on in the day, where let's say that guys get ruled out from the Celtics. We get some of the Cavs guys ruled out. There's just other guys priced around RJ Barrett that are going to be higher priority. So it's a really flimsy 16.7% exposure I have to him. The best player on the team, points per dollar, is Kelly Olynyk, but he's too popular for me. So I come in underweight to him. So I don't think this is a Toronto team I'm going to end up really having any priorities from.
Same.
We've got SMP asking, what on earth is a DJ Carlton? You ever seen Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? He's one of the characters there. DJ Carlton. That's who he is. Anything else you want to add from the Toronto Raptors?
No, I think it's DJ Carton. I think.
Oh, I thought he typed Carlton.
Oh, well, yeah, Carlton from Fresh Prince. Great reference.
Okay, so yeah, DJ Carton. Different guy. He is on the Toronto Raptors. Not somebody you have to actually worry about today, though, because he is I don't know. How many minutes do you think is the most we could see out of DJ Carton? Like 12?
If I were playing 150 showdown, I don't think I would get to him.
Yeah, so DJ Carton is on a 10-day contract. He played 12 and a half minutes last game. His points per minute fantasy rate is very poor so far, and very small sample size. We're looking at a guy who's playing about 8 minutes per game this year with a 4.5 fantasy point per minute average. So DJ Carton, he's DJ Carlton to me, not somebody I want to get to. He's the hybrid of DJ Jazzy Jeff and Carlton from Fresh Prince. He's two Fresh Prince characters together.
I love that. DJ Jazzy Jeff was so good on that show too.
Anything else you want to add from the Toronto Raptors or the Pelicans side of the game?
No, I'm good.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. Just a couple of games left here to talk about. And the next one, San Antonio Spurs against the Houston Rockets. And Matt, if the San Antonio Spurs are on a slate, you guys better believe that Victor Wembanyama is somebody I'm going to be paying up for. He's not somebody who's going to show up in like 50% of my lineups or anything like that, but only 8% projected ownership to Wemby on a slate where it looks like we're going to have a good amount of value. I'm overweight to him at the moment. The more value that opens up, the ownership is going to go up on Wemby, but it's also going to make it easier for me to get to him. People know my stance on Wemby. I've been overweight to him on almost every single slate this year, and that is likely to be no different today. Relative to ownership, he's one of my favorite contrarian spend-up options.
I'm with you. I also kind of feel like his ownership has something to do with his questionable tag. Mm-hmm. Like, if he gets ruled in, I would expect him to be higher owned. That said, he's hella expensive now. I mean, he's like in the same pricing tier as Jokic, like not quite as expensive, but in that same tier now. So I think there'll be some sticker shock. I don't care. He's easily paying off his salary. He's amazing right now. Any slate he's on, I think as long as he's not 12K, even at 12K, he's probably in play. So, like, anything under that, I think he looks good. And, yeah, there's going to be games where he doesn't produce when he gets more expensive, but he's got 70+ in back-to-back games, and I think that's who he is. I don't think that's an aberration at all.
And the minutes are there now, which was not to say that it wasn't the case before, but they were somewhat capped before. That's not really as much of an issue. He played 34 minutes a couple of games ago, actually 34 and a half minutes against the Minnesota Timberwolves on February 27th. So you tell me there's potential now that we get 34 and a half minutes out of Wemby in a competitive game. Sign me up for that. I have another, I don't know if this would be considered a hot take or not, Matt. By the end of the season next year, Wemby will be the most expensive player on DraftKings and FanDuel.
Oh, I think that could come like way sooner than that. I think the only guy that really might stop that is Luka, but I think that he's certainly on that trajectory, because I was just about to ask you, like, on that same note, if he were playing, like, I know he's not on a limit anymore, but he's still not playing, anywhere close to 40 minutes. If you were playing 38 minutes a night, what would his price tag be? 13K?
It would be astronomical. I don't even know how you price them. It's the same thing where, I used to work at Basketball Monster with Josh Lloyd and did a lot of yearly basketball content, yearly basketball projections, things along those lines. And he tweeted out the other day, Wemby is going to break fantasy basketball yearly leagues in a way you can't do snake drafts anymore, because whoever goes first is just going to have a ridiculous advantage. You have to do auction drafts in yearly leagues because of how good of a fantasy producer he is. These are his numbers now over the course of the last month. In the last month now, Wemby, who's also becoming more efficient now, everything about these numbers are ridiculous, Matt. So his last month of games, he's shooting 45% from three. He's shooting over 50% on his 2-point attempts. He's averaging 2 steals per game, 4.5 blocks, 4.5 assists, 10.5 rebounds, 22.5 points, and that is in sub 30 minutes per game.
I could see him starting the season next season as the highest priced player on those platforms. What I was going to ask you, and kind of where I thought you were going, when is he the best player in the league?
It's tough, right? Because that to me is still a little bit further away, because I don't envision he's going to be better than Jokic next year.
Do you think he'll ever be better than Jokic is right now?
He has the potential to be. I can't guarantee it, but if my gut feeling is he will be, But it's just kind of like intuition. We've never seen somebody with this kind of skill set before.
Yeah, like I struggle to ever say that anyone could be surpass LeBron, but like we've never seen anything like it. Like it's you can't even, you got to watch. If anyone out there hasn't watched him, you got to do it.
We should talk about, though, he's listed as questionable to play. Of course, of all the days for my browser to crash, does it have to be when like we're trying to do the show here on late notice here? All right, so got to get everything back up. All the data and stats I had up here. But anyway, Wemby is listed as questionable to play today. So we do have to consider the fact that he might not play. I believe also Julian Champagnie was also questionable. I think those are the only two players on the injury report now. But if Wemby doesn't play today, what can we expect from the Spurs minutes as well as the usage? Because there would have to be value if there is no Wembanyama tonight.
Yeah, so if he's out, I think Zach Collins is a lock. Probably becomes the best play on the slate. We'll start at center. We'll play good minutes, 4,500. I think the Spurs have done a bad job of surrounding Wemby with like the right pieces, even in just year one. That said, guys like Devin Vassell are really starting to come into their own. This team, and that's my big thing for when Wemby will become one of the like top elite players is when the Spurs are good. I could see that happening as soon as next year. They're already starting to play better. So all their secondary options would look good here. I think they look fine even with Wemby in, but with Wemby out, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, the value guy is really Zach Collins. Not sure there's anyone else that would jump off the page. Not a great spot against Houston. How about you?
Zach Collins for sure, right? Because Zach Collins cheap. We've seen him start in the past, and rightfully so. The Spurs went away from playing Wemby and Collins minutes together. It just didn't really make sense from a floor spacing standpoint. And Wemby really took off as soon as they moved Zach Collins to the bench. And it does suck for Zach Collins because he's played really well when he's gotten the opportunity this year. So if you look at Zach Collins overall as a starter this year, he has started 24 games, 28 and a half minutes in those starts, and putting up 30 DraftKings points. So DraftKings, FanDuel, Zach Collins, I agree with you. Really strong option should Wemby be out. They're going to be forced to give him bigger minutes. But then just other players on the team wouldn't be quite as big of priorities as Zach Collins. But Jeremy Sochan, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, these are all guys that would have to pick up more usage just because Wemby does take so many shots when he's on the court.
Yes, but I'm also like, and this is a kind of a back and forth I do with myself a lot. Like, when you have a guy like Wemby, certainly he's going to eat up usage, and those guys are going to have to just pick up the slack without him. They might just suck without Wemby, though. Like, this is not a good team. They're not, and like they might need Wemby to like, be competitive and have good offensive possessions and get these other guys open shots. Like, you can't really project that stuff, but I think that's part of the, part of just the understanding of basketball, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could look up some of the on-off court numbers and just see what his guys' efficiency look like when Wemby is off the court here. As far as other players I'm getting to, I do currently have Keldon Johnson in 19% of lineups. He looks like a pretty decent contrarian play, only 6% owned. Keldon Johnson is somebody who already does kind of play staggered minutes from Wemby. And then we'd be looking at, so he's accustomed to playing minutes without Wemby since he's been coming off the bench a lot over the last, couple months or so. So Keldon Johnson already is playing minutes without Wemby, and then his minutes without the minutes that he typically would play with Wemby to have higher usage. So Keldon Johnson's the one who I would have the most interest in of the higher usage type guys if Wembanyama isn't able to play.
Same. I think he looks like a borderline lock at 5,200. Not as strong of a play as Collins, but I heard someone say, can't remember if it was you or I can't even remember, that the reason they started bringing Keldon Johnson off the bench was just to spread out him and Wemby, just their usages, et cetera. So I think that with Wemby out, he still might not start, but Keldon's going to play more than he normally would in my eyes.
Yeah, and I'm just still pulling up some of the on-off court stats here just to see what we could find. And here, just pulled it up. So true shooting percentages for the Spurs with Wemby off the court. It's shitty. It's shitty for sure. So actually, Trey Jones has been okay from an efficiency standpoint. He is a 58.8% true shooting with Wemby off the court. Devin Vassell as well, 57.8% true shooting in the absence of Wemby. Keldon Johnson has been very inefficient, but that's just kind of generally who Keldon Johnson is. He's inefficient no matter who you're going to pair him with, but he's never afraid to take shots. So Keldon Johnson has a 53.6% true shooting percentage when Wemby's off the court. But like I said, it's kind of a scenario that he's been used to playing with this year anyway. Anything else you want to talk about from the Spurs? All right, so we got the Houston Rockets to talk about, but before we get there, I want to tell you guys we are sponsored by BetMGM today. And if you guys live in North Carolina and you're looking to sign up for some sports books, because going live, it's already been passed. So we've got sports betting is legal now in North Carolina, but it hasn't gone live. It's going to be going live next week. And if you pre-register with our link at BetMGM, all you have to do if you live in North Carolina, sign up at BetMGM with our link. You make an account. And when sports betting goes live in North Carolina, you're available to bet next week, you're going to have $200 in bonus bets sitting there waiting for you in your account. That is it. This is the easiest way imaginable to build up your bankroll. Sign up at BetMGM using that link below. We've got links for all the other sports books that are going to be live in North Carolina with deals built in over there as well. So sign up at BetMGM, though, with the link we have below. Get yourself $200 in bonus bets, and all you have to do is make an account. You don't have to risk anything to do it. If you're anybody who has a gambling problem, call or text the number 1-800-GAMBLER. By the way, it is kind of funny that it's just, I get it, it's the legality, so I have to do that part of the read. But it's funny to tell people that if you have a gambling problem, also telling them that they haven't started betting yet. But just kind of the way that the legality of it goes. But Houston Rockets side of the game, I'm going to do a bunch of Şengün here, Matt. He's actually north of half of my lineups, and that's already assuming Wemby is in. It's always hard to figure out the individual player against a matchup and whatnot. And we know on the whole, the Spurs defense is not any good, even though Wemby is currently grading out as like a 98th percentile defender. But if we're going to take Wemby off the court, Şengün should really eat in this matchup. I love getting to him.
I like Şengün a lot. I think I like Bam slightly more, though. And they're like basically the same price. So again, if I were multi-entering, I'd just play both. I mean, they're coming in with about the same ownership. And maybe if I play 3 lineups tonight, I'll play like one of each and then them together once, because I do think they look similar. But if I had to choose, I would choose Bam. And I know you don't have to choose, but I think that it's, people like to hear that stuff because it is a decision point. And I personally like Bam. That said, that's not an indictment on Şengün at all. Our tools love him here, and that's with Wemby in. Projects for about 45 fantasy points at 8,200. He has not been as consistent over the past, month or so, but his price is down because of that. So I get the Şengün love. I also like him quite a bit. Again, I am going back and forth with him or Adebayo. That could change in, by the time we hit lock, that could change in 5 minutes. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and if we look at the Houston Rockets as a team, they do have the core players healthy. Tari Eason, he's already been out. He's going to be out for the rest of the season due to leg injury, or what was it? He had some weird knee surgery. I forget exactly what it was that they called it. But so Tari Eason is going to be out. That does really solidify that there's a little bit more of a condensed rotation here for Houston. It's a team getting a lot of exposure to in a good matchup against the San Antonio Spurs. 55% Şengün. I have 26% Fred VanVleet, about 20% Jabari Smith, 18% Jalen Green. This is a pretty good team to target. It's one of the only spots I'm finding myself getting exposure to without there being a significant injury on the team.
I get it. They all are priced good, and they're in a great spot. So it makes sense.
And Jeremy Savage asking how many lineups, 20 or 150. Yeah, this is with my top 150 lineups selected, the exposures that I was getting to, just for reference for anybody who's wondering as we go through this. Anything else you want to add from the Houston Rockets? All right, so let's talk about the final game on the slate. And this is where stuff is also going to get pretty interesting. We got the Indiana Pacers taking on the Dallas Mavericks, and we're going to start on the Pacers side, but on the Mavericks side, Luka is questionable today, which is something that could massively change the slate, especially considering this is the last game of the night. It's also an island game, and it is a 245.5 total, which is 17 points higher than the second highest total game on the entire slate. Injury news for the Pacers: Aaron Nesmith is questionable, Ben Shepherd is questionable, Isaiah Wong is questionable, Oscar Tshiebwe is questionable, Quentin Jackson is also questionable. Most of those guys don't matter, but that is what the injury report is here. Is there anything that really stands out to you from the Pacers? I'm getting Jalen Smith in some lineups, but like we've talked about with some of these other cheap guys, kind of like Jordan Nwora, that's going to fall by the wayside as more value opens up.
Tyrese Halliburton's price continues to fall. So Looking at him at 9K, what's your Halliburton take here?
My Halliburton, I'm concerned about his health. Something isn't quite right with him.
Right.
And we know that he's battled injuries throughout the year. And while he hasn't missed a game in a significant amount of time, he has not looked the same since his hamstring got hurt. And he did also a couple of games ago briefly have to leave the game to go to the locker room. So my take on Halliburton is even though he played 36 minutes last game and there's an upside on him at his price point, I don't think he's healthy.
I tend to agree, man. Ever since that hamstring injury, I think it was on like January 7th, maybe. Yes, I think it was around then. And then he came back too early a couple games later, like when Siakam made his debut. That I don't think he's recovered fully from it. So he does have upside at 9K, but impossible to trust. I won't play him in like my 1 to 3 lineups, coming in with nice leverage, but just really hard to get to him, especially in this spot. Indiana looks like a team I'm not interested really at all here.
Here's where Halliburton becomes interesting. If a bunch of really chalky value opens up, Matt, and it's like, all right, I have to get to like Zach Collins, but he's going to be 60% owned. And let's say Miles McBride is starting at point guard and he's projected for 45 minutes and he's projected for 70% ownership. And then it's like, all right, I've got all these value plays. And then if I want to differentiate lineups, that's where Tyrese Halliburton comes more into play for me, is if he's really easy to get to and I already have a bunch of super chalky value options, then he's a pay up option that I could go to differentiate some lineups. That's a scenario he'd make more sense. But I mean, just as of right now, I don't find myself getting to him.
I was thinking the exact same thing. But then when I thought about it a little bit more, I think personally, I would rather play DeJounte Murray than him. So
reasonable.
Murray's also not getting ownership. I think you could go either way with that and throw Brunson in that mix. But you're right. That's really the only way Halliburton becomes like viable, is just to spend up to be contrarian option when a lot of your other roster spots are chalky. With that.
So let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks to close us out here, unless you have anything else to add from Indiana.
Mm-mm.
All right, so let's talk about the Mavericks then. And the big news here is that Luka is officially listed as questionable to play. But I'm going to start by asking you this. How realistic do you think it is that Luka sits out of tonight's game?
I think he plays.
Okay, so he is dealing with, he's got like a nose injury, he's got ankle soreness. So he's been questionable for the last few games, and he's ended up playing through the various ailments that he's had. But we should still talk about the potential scenario where he sits and how we might want to construct our lineups, because like we said before, if he does end up being questionable heading into lock, Matt, this is an island game with a massive total. We may not know whether Luka is going to be in or out at lock. If that is the scenario, how do you think you would approach building your lineups to take into account that if Luka plays, he'd be a good pay-up option to get to, but if he sits, we would need to be jamming Kyrie?
It makes me, excuse me, I got something in my throat, so
I'll give you a second to clear it then, and I'll just tell you guys, and you can see it on screen with some of my exposures right here, is I think it makes a whole lot of sense to just build lineups with Kyrie right now, and this is going to benefit you in a couple of ways. First off, Kyrie's playing against the Indiana Pacers. I already think he's a good low-owned option to get to. Only project for 13% ownership. I'm getting to Kyrie Irving about a third of my lineups. So he already, to me, looks like a pretty good under-owned option. But if you get Luka out, Kyrie Irving this year, 1.49 DraftKings points per minute, 1.46 FanDuel points per minute when he plays without Luka Doncic. So if you could get Kyrie Irving at relatively modest ownership without Luka, yeah, you want to be loading up on Kyrie. I really hope we don't get any kind of Luka news at lock. I'd rather just be a spot where people don't want to play it post-lock, and then we can talk about, late swaps and everything on the playback show later that I'll be doing. So this is where I really think that Kyrie Irving could look good. Already as is, and then massive 1.49 DraftKings points, 1.46 FanDuel points per minute if Luka doesn't play. So you want to load up on Kyrie Irving, in my opinion, even if Luka's questionable at lock. If Luka's ruled out before lock, you're playing a bunch of Kyrie Irving. If Luka plays, then I'll have to come down on Kyrie a little bit. But how are you approaching the Dallas Mavericks, Luka being questionable?
So I think that makes sense. So Kyrie already looks good. So he's a good play. I think my question to you is, if Luka's in, are you going to try to get a lot of that Kyrie to Luka, have both? Are you going to want multiple multiple pieces in this game so you can make some pivots? Like, What's your Luka stance, putting Kyrie aside?
Yeah, so I currently have Luka in 15% of my lineups, and let's say Luka plays, right? So if Luka's ruled in today, or even if he's questionable at lock, ruled in later, it looks like this is going to be a slate where a lot of value opens up. And right now, it's a little hard to get to Luka just because of his price point. I do not think it's going to be hard to get to Luka later as more value opens up. So assuming a scenario where Luka is in, he would be probably my most rostered spend up on the entire slate. He would be somebody who ends up in like 40% of lineups.
That makes sense, especially the value point you brought up. Depending on the value we get and not like potentially knowing the Luka news, I think, oh man, it's tough because I want to say Kyrie and Luka together are viable, and they are. The problem is if we don't have the Luka news and Luka gets ruled out, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, so that is something that would potentially be tricky. Other than that, while this is an island game, it's not that spread out from the other games.
True.
And here's the really shitty situation. If Luka and Wemby are both ruled out, because here's what you do right now. If Luka's ruled out, you go to Wemby and then you pay up for some other spots as well with the extra salary. If both of them are out, then it kind of becomes tricky because almost all of the games lock at 7 or 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. There's one 8 p.m. game, one 8:30 p.m. game, and then the 10 p.m. game isn't on the slate.
I actually think, just personally, there's no method to this madness. Luka is more likely to play than Wemby. Like, Luka's had this tag for a while now. It's not quite LeBron Fugazi, but they're listing Luka questionable like every game now. This is Wemby's first time being questionable, at least with this injury. So more cause for pause for me there. I'm pretty confident Luka plays here. They need wins. He doesn't look injured. So I don't know.
That's a good point, too. He's been on this injury report for a while. He's clearly played extremely well through it. And then also, the Mavericks are just not really winning games. You look at where they are in the standings right now. They're the 8th seed in the West. Nobody wants to be in that play-in game. Another thing, too, is I don't know if this matters to Luka as much as like the MVP mattered to Joel Embiid. He's dead for the MVP if they're in the play-in game, though, because the way the voting works, the ballots are due right after the regular season ends. And there's no way that the voters are going to vote for a guy who's in the play-in game because they don't want a guy who's potentially going to miss the playoffs to be in the MVP consideration. So that's something else as well. If Luka wants to be an actual serious MVP candidate, these next 20 games, I have to get out of the play-in.
I think he's already teetering on dead just because it's not even just a play-in. Like, yeah. I'd be surprised if he won the MVP if they were like the 6 or 7 seed. Possible, but I think that Jokic or Shea would probably get it. Those are the two front runners. I'll say this about Luka. I think aside from where Dallas is, he's right with those other guys. He's the best offensive player in the league right now in my eyes.
And that is going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you have not done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and don't forget, we got the links and everything updated now. If you sign up for the Sims Max weekly package below with the promo code Wemby, it's already loaded into that link below. You're going to get 50% off your first payment on the NBA Sims weekly package. Hoping to give some people an opportunity to try it out at a lower price point. This is an exclusive offer to people who are watching our live shows. We're not going to be promoting it on the website. We're not going to be promoting it on Twitter or social media platforms. We just want to make it something exclusive to people who watch our content. So take advantage of that if you guys have been wanting to try out. That deal is only going to be offered through Friday. So you got today, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday to check it out. Promo code Wemby with that link. Thank you guys very much for watching. And we'll see you later tonight. We'll do the deep dive tonight. We got live before lock, and of course the post-lock show over on Playback, which could be a big one considering all the players that are questionable in the late breaking news that could occur. So see you guys later tonight, and good luck.